Oh, like something like that has a purpose, but it can't be it. It can't be. Ladies and gentlemen, I am joined today by the great Art Deco. Art, thank you for joining me on Yo, That's My Jawn.
Yo, yo. Thanks for having me.
So I always like to tell everybody as an entry point, like kind of my relationship with their creativity or whatnot. And for you, I was a fan when WXPN started playing Head Rush in their rotation and all. Really into the song, really dug it. But what took me to the next level was seeing you guys perform at Non-Com. That year, what was that, like 2002, maybe 2003, somewhere around there.
2002, yeah.
But that was just an incredible performance, and it turned me from like a casual fan into like, fuck, these guys are great. And then recently, so I host this other show with Bruce Warren from WXPN called Too Old, Too New, and it's a music discovery show. We each bring an old song and a new song and kind of present it as something for the audience to check out. And Serene Demon, when you dropped it as a single, blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. If like just an absolute level up, plus everything I've been looking for. So when the opportunity came to chat, I jumped on it in a heartbeat because I am super excited to have you on the show.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, the wow, non-convention. What a clunky pun. Non-convention. Yeah, I think I said something to the effect of I was blonde then, and that I was like the illegitimate love child of Wayne Gretzky and Ellen DeGeneres.
Yeah.
Which I feel like most people took away as like, oh, stand-up comedy. Okay, cool. No, it's like I'm here to promote music, but every once in a while I get my licks in, you know?
Yeah, I started going to that. I think that was the first year that I actually went to multiple days of the conference, and then last year I went as a contributor, kind of, I guess, not really, but podcasting and stuff like that. Less as a fan listening to music, and it's really great that kind of that network of NPR type stations and AAA radio exists because I feel like they're the last ones doing it. Everybody else, all the other corporate stations have kind of, they're all owned by the same people and they're all playing the same playlists, and it's scary.
Amen. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and non-com radio, NACC charts, CMJ before that, Earshot up in Canada. Earshot is like it's a funny one because if you go to, I'm in Victoria, BC. There's a university here that reports to Earshot in Vancouver. Bigger city, University of British Columbia is an international university. If it was an American city, it would be a Div 1 school, right? And yet you leave like 100 feet away from the radio station tower, and it's like dropouts. So when you tell someone who's not really familiar with college radio in the States, hey, I'm charting on college radio, or so and so's playing my song, they'd be like, college radio, like the crappy student run things with like no cell reception, no signal strength. And yet you walk into WXPN for non-convention, and it's like, it's a pro setup. Like it's a legit operation with salaried staffed employees and music lovers, really doing the Lord's work, if you will, and KEXP and Tiny Desk NPR and KCRW. I mean, I can go on and on and on. I love the format. It really bridges the gap between, this impossible to attain thing, which is commercial radio. For a lot of artists, they'll never even take a sniff at it. And, internet radio, which can be, hit or miss. There's how many internet radio stations do you know of are actually like tastemakers? Right. It feels like so yeah, it's somewhere in that world, there's like college radio in the States, and it really does service a need that a lot of artists like long to, get support from to advance their careers.
For sure. It's a beautiful thing. So tell me a little bit about a very small child, Art. What was music like around the house when you were a kid?
So we moved around a lot. I grew up in Victoria, BC, which is where I live now. But I was born in Ottawa, Ontario. And when I was about 6 or 7 years old, my family, we moved across Canada. So it'd be like, Ottawa to Victoria is probably I don't know how many miles, 3,000 miles. It'd be like moving from like Detroit to Seattle. Like it's a pretty long haul. And along the way, a couple that trip was really sort of planted the seed for me in a couple of ways. Like for the first way, it was like me and my dad in the U-Haul moving truck, my mom and my two sisters following behind in like a little Ford Tempo. And like all summer long, we would just be making our way across Canada and kind of taking the slow route, seeing the sights and sounds. And it was AM Goldie oldies the whole way. So I'm hearing, Del Shannon, Runaway. I'm hearing, Yakety Yak, Don't Talk Back. I'm hearing the Beatles and the Beach Boys and, just like all sorts of music that like the melodies really hit you. And I was being exposed to that at a very young age. And then when we landed, all of my dad's vinyl collection got completely destroyed and smashed up. The only records that survived were like Christmas albums and Beethoven. And being a precocious little 7-year-old, I wanted to like learn how to like drop the needle on and press play and listen to the crackles and the pops. And so I was listening to Beethoven at 7 years old. And that led me to, beg my mom and dad to put me into piano lessons because I wanted to learn how to play Moonlight Sonata. And after a couple of lessons with this teacher, he pulled my parents aside and he's like, okay, little Arthur, he's learning at a pretty fast clip. I should get him to my teacher because he'll be better equipped to handle this little weirdo kid who wants to learn Moonlight Sonata. And one thing led to another. And my first true like music mentor was at 7 or 8 years old, playing piano in this little church basement, taking lessons once a week with this guy named George Esahas, who was like a really renowned jazz classical teacher. And that started my musical journey. So like a one move and piano lessons. And then, many, many years later, here we are.
Yeah, that's
talking to Nate.
It all led you to this moment,
yeah, the whole thing led me to this moment.
Congratulations, you've made it. So you seem like a quick adapter to it. When did you kind of start writing your own stuff? Were you immediately kind of experimenting on sounds and trying to do things, or were you trying to do more Beethoven-y, or I want to learn this piece or whatnot?
I mean, the lessons were interesting because I never really learned the proper way. I never played to a metronome. I never had sight reading with proper technique and fingering. It was all like there's two pianos, like dueling piano style in this really wretched basement. And it was dark and dank and it smelled like skunk. And then friends years later told me that he was such a pothead. So he would be like, yeah, keep practicing, like let up a quick spliff out back. But I would learn with my ear and he would teach you 30, he called it the Chopin method actually. And he would teach you 30 seconds of a song at a time. And you would learn the feel and learn how to use your, I definitely, every good boy deserves fudge. And I've kind of like slowly like stumbled my way through like learning the chords, but he would make a cassette of him playing that 30-second piece and talking like, then slow down here and like, then speed up here. And here's where you get heavy. And then he would give me the cassette and say, go practice. And I'd go home and I'd listen to the cassette and he'd scribble out the sheet music. And so I learned how to use my ear. And that led me to having confidence over a few years. And by the time I was a teenager, I was like, to hell with the piano. I want to learn electric guitar. I'd started working in kitchens, when I was 15, 16 years old, and all the older line cooks would bring in their big CD binders and slap them down on the line and pull out, Led Zeppelin and all this classic rock and Bowie and stuff. And I'd spend my entire paycheck at, the record store buying CDs and, eventually save up and you buy a guitar. And like, I went through all that stuff, but eventually when I started in my like 20s to write my own music, I had this like weird muscle memory that I was activating from the Chopin method and learning from George Esahas and playing the piano. And I think that foundational support allowed me to kind of like brick by brick sort of wander my way into this weird world of songwriting.
Yeah. What were what were was the early songs like? What were you kind of? I don't want to say mimicking because that's always. But what were you inspired by? Like, what kind of would you relate it to sonically?
Like my personal Art Deco music stuff. I mean, I played in other people's bands in my 20s and I was just kind of a session local guy in Vancouver and I really couldn't get my act together to like front my own project. And by the time I turned 28, 29, I was really honestly burnt out. I kind of figured that dream is dead. And I moved to a Gulf island and I was taking care of my grandmother who had like Alzheimer's and I was trying to like, am I gonna go back to school? Am I gonna get like a real job? What am I gonna do? And in that journey, in that sort of section of my life, I kind of got back into music, but for me and for on my terms and to do it for myself. And I didn't really I'd sold off all my guitars. I didn't really own much gear, so I had a crappy, MacBook with like a cracked screen, and I would sing into the pinhole microphone and use GarageBand and I'd use chopsticks on a cutting board, and I was making some pretty scrappy, janky demos. Uh, and then around like 2014 or 15, I went into the studio and, I scraped some money together and that recording I self-released. It was called Day Fevers. Shout out to the 10 people that own a vinyl copy of it.
I was literally
Uh,
just on Discogs before this, like trying to track down a copy.
yeah, I mean, there's still a few for sale on
Oh,
artdecomusic.ca
is
if
there?
anybody wants. Yeah. But it became sort of like a local, I don't want to say a cult favorite, but I had a little bit of a following that I was building and I was playing live. And because I had this life in the Gulf Islands, I wanted to kind of keep it separate. So, adopted the stage name and was wearing makeup and a wig at the time. Like I was literally like I was like in witness protection as a musician. I was like, I want to reinvent myself and come back into the city that I turned my back on 5 years ago. And I wanted so that people don't really connect me to the old art they knew, and hence all of the sort of costumery. And I was really angry and immature and sort of rebelling against this sort of ham-fisted rock and roll aesthetic of, the deep V necklaces with like the fedora hat and the ripped jeans and like the whiskey kind of like or like the indie rock thing going on where everything was just like laissez-faire and normcore. Like I was like, I want to dress the opposite. I want to dress in suits and I want to kind of really take the aesthetic serious. I was really neurotic and I'd spend every day thinking about this. And but I started to kind of repeat the old failures of just like and those failures began to pile up and it drove me to sort of double down and a couple of things happened and I I I had basically went to the bank and I like just took out as much money as I could and I bought a bunch of recording gear in about 2017 and I used that money to like set up a studio in my little cottage on the island. And I was like, I'm gonna spend the rest of the year learning music production. I'm not going to blame other people for, you know, not making any excuses. Like Day Fevers didn't get me a record deal. It's not getting me the fan base I want, but it's my fault. It's incumbent upon me to make a change and make a difference. And if I can't blame a producer or an engineer or the mix or other people. Like if I'm just going to DIY this and write better songs and really like bootstrap this. So I spent the year writing what would become Trespasser, and that one thing led to another, and I got a manager and an agent and a record deal, all of it based off of the strength of that album. And then really that kind of feels like where like the next phase of this whole journey truly began. And I feel like that's where when Paperbag Records got behind me in 2018, that's like sort of ground zero of, what's led me to you, Nate, and get off my Jawn. I mean, what can I say? It all leads back to this podcast.
That's right. That kind of growth or kind of, it's interesting how, it kind of started from trying to, shake everything off, but then comes back to being essentially, unlocking yourself, finding your true kind of artistic voice or whatnot. At any point, you mentioned kind of figuring out recording and whatnot. At any point, have you or do you produce for anybody else? Like, have you kind of sat down and worked with anybody else from a production standpoint, or?
I mean, that's a great question. For my own music, so Jason Corbett produced Day Fevers and Trespasser. On in standard definition, I co-produced it with a guy named Colin Stewart, whose wife is Catherine Calder. She plays in a band called New Pornographers. And he's produced a lot of like incredible albums. He's very much like an analog guy in the indie world. We got along great. The next album after that, After the Head Rush, speaking of non-convention, we were promoting that album when we played there. That I produced myself. And then Serene Demon, it's a co-production with Joe Ciccarelli. Um, I mean, that album, Serene Demon, took like a year to make. Probably nose to tail, like closer to two by the time this came out. And a good chunk of that record I did like myself, obviously with like a whole bunch of great musicians and bouncing around to different studios. I think after about 2 weeks in the studio between Joe and I, we realized that we had very different ideas of what this record ought to be, and we amicably kind of parted ways. But yeah, he gets a co-production credit on it, and he had some really good ideas with respect to punching up some of the choruses and trying some stuff. But I don't know. Once I have it in my vision, where I want things to be and how I want things to sound. I mean, I spend every waking minute on this stuff. Like it's very little is left to risk or chance. That's not to say like I don't leave the door open for input or collaboration or ideas in the creative process, but there's like, I go to bed thinking about these songs. I wake up thinking about these songs. I'm eating to get back to the studio to work on these songs. I go on a run, I'm listening to the songs. It's like, how can I tinker and whittle away at this piece of creative wood and turn it into a little statue? And I feel like with each record, I'm getting better and better and better at getting to the truth. But to answer your question, I'd love to produce other artists and get out of my stupid Cro-Magnon brain and swim around in other creative pools. Like, I mean, I just told my managers today, like, I am open for business. I would love to work with other artists or bands and co-write or co-produce their creative endeavors. I just love being in the studio. I love it, as it's my favorite place to be.
It's awesome. I dig it. Talking about Serene Demon, leading into it, you did what, 2 months in New York, kind of writing and kind of living and experiencing New York City. Just the description alone feels like a film to me. Like but what was that experience like? Like, I guess what did you find in New York City that kind of led you to what you've created and what you've released with Serene Demon?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So again, there's so much time that passes. Like when you ask, like my origin story, does it begin in 2018? Does it begin like 5 years before that? Or does it begin in my 20s? Does it begin in my youth? Like turned 41 this year, so it's like it's been a long, long slog. But even with respect to Serene Demon, like have a I wanted to have a ground zero where I can definitively say in interviews such as this is where that album started. And so I told everybody, like, and I tell people, like, it literally started, like, I had pretty much nothing, no material. And I book a trip to New York City by myself. I just finished the campaign on the last album. I had not gone on a trip for myself, not related to music, in many, many years. And so I'm like, I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna rent an apartment with a piano and bring some books and bring my recording mobile thing and mic up the piano and have an acoustic guitar and just like see what comes of it. And I make playlists, and there was a lot of jazz and soul and cinematic, playlists and stuff. And I was reading a lot of existentialist novels, like, Albert Camus' The Stranger really struck a chord with me. And I would go on these like long walks at night, go to art galleries, go to plays, go to live shows. I didn't really have any friends in New York City. And the point wasn't really to like see people I know. Like I wanted to feel like a stranger, feel like a fish out of water. I wanted to, I love going to a half empty bar on a Monday night and sitting up at the bar and like talking to the bartenders and chatting to the people. Like I'm way more gregarious and outgoing when I'm in a far off place. I can put on like a character, and I feel like the stories that I was collecting and the sort of interactions I was having with complete total stranger. I mean, I was singing karaoke at a bar with like groups of people and then just disappearing out the back door. I was, you know, having lots of connections, micro intense connections with just random strangers, and it was starting to like get me out of my shell and evoke this sort of noirish feeling. There's like the steam coming out of the New York sewer vents, and you're like getting off the subway, and there's like a rat that runs by, and you've had a couple of drinks, and you got your trench coat collar up, and like I felt like Alain Delon and like La Samurai or something. And so I would go sit down at this piano and I'd have a glass of wine, and the first thing that kind of poured sort of channeled through me was the opening chords to Serene Demon song. Out of all that, if you can imagine distilling that period of time, and then I have to like I just put it, you grab this and you press play or record and you just jam out. And I thought, with this song, if I can make this the sort of the rug that ties the room together. I'm a big fan of like AM, going back to my original story of driving across Canada with my family and my dad and listening to like AM radio. Like there's something in the 70s with like, Harry Nilsson, Without You, or All by Myself by Eric Carmen. If anybody's ever seen the Midnight Special, they're all on YouTube now, but you can hear Eric Carmen playing this piano ballad, and it's like in the middle of it, he plays this crazy solo for a couple of minutes. I think it's a Rachmaninoff song. All that shit really speaks to me. And so I was thinking of that, and like, what if I did my own sort of like Sweet Thing candidate, like Bowie's Triptych off of Diamond Dogs, where it's like a sort of feels like it's soundtracking like a crime thriller, and it's not really on metronomic time. It speeds up and slows down. It gets loud and big and gets very small, and it's jazzy, and it just feels like an overflowing ashtray and a glass of like an empty glass of like Hennessy. And I wanted that in my catalog so fucking badly, and I just chipped away for 2 months on that composition, and I finally had the demo of it, which is nearly identical to how it turned out on the album. I remember showing like my longtime rhythm section, and they kind of laughed at me. They're like, "You're insane! Like, how are you ever gonna play this live? Like, what's with the time?" I'm so bad with time, and timing is not my strong suit. So I like set up the click track to speed up and slow down, but I put it in like the wrong time signature. It was like in 3/4 time. And Malcolm, my drummer's like, "You're an idiot. This isn't 4/4 time." He had to pull out all this, like, he had to literally do algebra to like convert it at every section where it speeds up the BPM. It was a nightmare to actually record that song in the studio. That may have even been the straw that broke the camel's back for Joe. He's just like, I think I gave him a migraine that day. But yeah, I'm proud of that song, and it really is sort of an avatar sonically for what the record stands for and what I'm about at this point in my life, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I heard it, like, it was a revelation to me because anybody who listens to this show or the other show knows that one of the things that I lament a lot is the lack of like movement and epic nature of music anymore. Like because things are trying to fit on Spotify playlists and they're trying to kind of sonically match something that already exists. Like like yourself, I'm a huge Harry Nilsson fan. I love like we get into it later in the Jawntlet thing, but like Billy Joel and like you mentioned like the Bowie triptych and stuff like that. One of the things like when it gets to the piano breakdown of where it's down into the "you'll be happier in a little while," like one of the things that came to my mind was the "Don't Dream It, Be It" section of the floor show to Rocky Horror Picture Show. These are kind of things that are just ingrained in my musical DNA that I long for. And so when I first heard that song, I was just like, finally. Oh my God! Finally, it's like somebody's so it felt like an unlock, like I said, like a level up almost, which is a long way to say I really like that song. It turned out really
Well,
well.
thank you. It's funny that you mentioned the Rocky Horror. Uh, like I've obviously know like everybody knows Rocky Horror Picture Show and the music is iconic. Um, Science fiction double feature. I mean, Time Warp. It's like there's so many songs that jump out on that soundtrack. And but that one never really connected until I mean, I've heard a few people, you're like probably the fifth or sixth person to tell me, that section reminds them of that song. And I listened back to it and I'm like, oh yeah. And then I went on Halloween with some friends here in Victoria to there's this little indie theater called the Vic Theater. Shout out Vic Theater. I love that place. And they played the Rocky Horror Picture Show and I like sat in an audience. They even gave you a little package with like the popcorn or the rice or whatever, like to kind of, and when it's raining, everybody's got their newspapers over their head. And I experienced Rocky Horror Picture Show in a sold out theater with like a few hundred other people cheering and singing and stuff. It was like, it's a very moving experience to kind of like watch a movie. Like I highly recommend anybody who listens to this podcast, if they live in a city and they're fortunate enough to live in a city that has like an independent movie theater that plays throwbacks, and you ever wanted to know what it would be like in, I don't know, 1977, seeing Star Wars for the first time, or seeing like Pulp Fiction in 94, like I go as much as possible, buy the popcorn, support it. It's very much informed this record. Just the cinema experience of it all. But yeah, seeing that song in theater, remember when I was like watching it, it's like it's a very moving piece. And so to have a comparison to that, I'm flattered. Obviously people really get hung up on like the glam rock comparisons with what I do. But I mean, I truly desperately was trying as hard as possible to move away from glam rock on this record. And 80s. I was telling the guys, no 80s, no synthesizers, no Jupiter 8s, no fucking ticky-tacky disco beats. And yet it's like 80s and glam rock. That's all I can compare it to on this album. And maybe little other elements of jazz or whatever. But yeah, that song and that soundtrack, it's like just like all timer, isn't it? It's so cool.
Well, it's really like I just actually read today an article in the New York Times about how it failed on Broadway when they tried to bring it over before the film came out, and they interview Richard O'Brien and Tim Curry in the article and stuff like that. But like to me, like the life of that project is so magical because it's one of the rare things where, like, I know that everybody kind of, looks at it as some campy thing or something like that, but like they created a movie that acts as a communal experience with the audience and change it. Like that movie is never going to be seen the same in a setting with multiple people there, like in a theater or whatnot. It's never going to be seen the same. It's going to change like a play. It's like it's one of the most amazing kind of pop culture experiences that's ever been done. Like, and yet it's kind of laughed at and kind of, people talk about, the cult nature of it all. But like, that's something that like I would kill to be able to create anything that had even half of, even a small fraction of a response like it has.
It's wild too, because like, T-Rextasy and Roxy Music and Bowie. I mean, those are like the three that's like the holy trinity for me with respect to like the glam rock genre. And then, I guess like 72 to 75 is maybe like, I'm not like a historian on the subject. But yeah, I'd imagine when Rocky Horror Picture Show came out, perhaps at the time they thought it was maybe riding the coattails of a fad that was going to disappear, much like the disco sucks movement trying to like hammer down this sound coming out of, clubs and replacing. It was like, the whole disco sucks movement. If you want to really get into it, Nile Rodgers has like all sorts of opinions on it, and it's really fascinating to see like when something gets so popular and it starts like as like this cult thing, and then it sort of like jumps into the mainstream, and then everybody wants to, there's the lunchboxes, there's the copycat acts, and then organically it will sort of, hit its backlash eventually, like all things do. I mean, grunge had a backlash, right? But there was, the anti-glam, anti sort of, the disco sucks movement. There was like a violent reaction to like trying to like shut those things down. And yet, in the face of it all, generation after generation, year after year, Rocky Horror Picture Show is like sort of had this enduring quality. And I think that gender identity and sexuality, it's a fluid thing and it evolves and people become more, tolerant to different sort of, lifestyles, I suppose. But back then, it seemed like we haven't really changed much in a lot of ways. Like there's still like people back then who must have been like really offended or homophobic towards that movie and that play and that story, much like now people are. But I think that like artists who are true to themselves and are kind of like waving that flag, and it's important to kind of make art that's like true to one's core beliefs. And I know that the people that are part of that production and that movie and that show, like, that was like a real statement for them to make, and they're very proud of it. And, fuck yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild because, you mentioned about like, like it wasn't that long ago. And like, this is something I've said, I've been talking about a lot post election, which is like, those people didn't all die. They didn't all disappear. And like that, it's not like they changed their opinion overnight. You know what I mean? So like, I just feel like people are not quiet about it anymore, and it scares the shit out of me. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but it's been there. But like the fact that like there was such a reaction to disco, and clearly it was a reaction to queer and marginalized groups. Like
And black people too is very anti-black. Yeah.
And it had like nothing to do with the music, because like those songs all rip, and they still rip up a dance floor. You know what I mean? Like, so like, they there was years of disco sucks and steamrollering vinyls and stuff like that. But boy, that music still stands, doesn't it? Like, you know what I mean? It's just
Totally.
ridiculous.
I mean, call me old fashioned, but I mean, if I went to, I mean, I feel like nightclubs, especially here in Canada, not that I was like a big club guy ever, but I'm telling you, if they play disco music or new wave or like anything from like 75 to 85, like that makes you want to dance, I mean, I would go to that club every weekend, because to me, that I'm going to sound like so this is gonna, I don't know how this is gonna go. I'm just gonna say it. Halloween used to be about that. Halloween, the night, used to be maybe not so much disco or 80s music, but like Halloween parties growing up was like an excuse to let your freak flag fly. And, I want the bangers. I want the hits. I want my arm in the air. I want to scream, sing. I want to celebrate good times. I want to hear spooky music. I want to hear everything from like, sure, the Thriller era, Michael Jackson. I want to hear like music that might be just like kooky and weird from that era, but like the Cramps, for example, like the stuff like that, or like Bela Lugosi's Dead, or goth tinged new wave, cold wave, dark wave. But I want music that's got a chorus and makes you want to like groove in like a cavernous, spooky, warehouse party or something. And those are the Halloween parties I used to go to when I was younger. And this time around, I went to a Halloween party this year, and it was man, it's like the kids have a different idea of what Halloween's about now, and it made me feel so old and out of place. Not to yuck other people young. Everybody do what you want to do, throw the parties you want to throw. But like, I went to a few parties, and we ended up at a house party And it was just like there wasn't one song played that had a chorus or words, or it was like all like very processed and like just of a different era. And it was like I felt really old and sad and out of place. Like this must have been what it felt like in like the 90s when, 80s or disco music was like officially dead with the cool kids, and that's the circle of life, I guess.
Yeah, I DJ not as much as I used to, but like parties, bars, stuff like that, and all. And in the past few years, it's been very challenging for me because like I'll DJ like a birthday party or something like that, and like I like people don't want to dance like at party like it's weird like younger people are kind of sitting around I'm going to sound even more ancient than you on their phones like
Yeah.
do Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, that kind of thing, but like it's not based on like kind of what you were talking about, the experience of like just going ham, with a bunch of people on a dance floor, sweaty and sticky and just, leaving it all out there. Like to me, it feels like it's like, it's either on pause or something. And I think part of it goes back to what I was saying about, and everybody listening is like, here he's going to go rant about Spotify again. But it's like that, trying to get that playlist sound. I don't know that people are engaged with music the way that like you and I engage with music, or the way that creatives engage with music. I think people just want something on in the background as kind of a soundtrack to what they're doing, less like a communication.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who said it, but I heard it and I've said it, I've repeated it, I've parroted it. Music now feels more like a scented candle to a lot of people, something they light and put in the background to kind of make the room smell good. And it's such a perfect metaphor, in a synesthetic kind of way, because it's like like my my relationship to music as a creator of music, as a writer of music, as a performer of it, as someone who's addicted to it. It's like that just feels like you're photocopying the Mona Lisa and putting it in a cheap frame. It's like like I get it. Not everybody's going to be like obsessed with the medium or the art of music with like the pinky in the air and the cork sniffy kind of mentality. And neither should they be, but like when there's this Spotification of the perfect playlist. And I mean, Liz Pelly wrote an amazing book. I've talked about it in almost every interview since reading it. Mood Machine. It's about Spotify, and really, I highly recommend it if you haven't picked it up. And it kind of gets, it doesn't really provide answers per se. Not that I was looking for a silver bullet. Otherwise, we would change everything. But you mentioned it, this thing, I think it starts with training and sort of indoctrinating the next generation of kids, the Gen Alpha kids, that this is a dangerous device. It's a powerful device. It has a lot of distracting, entertaining value to it. It can get a lot of shit done. It can make your life really easy, but it can also make your life like less fulfilled. And when you watch videos of hip hop in the Bronx and like those sort of underground parties where they're DJing on turntables and scratching for the first time. When you see parties at Studio 54 or La Hacienda, you don't see any of these, obviously. Maybe you might see a big brick, someone holding it, some coke dealer in the background, but you don't see any phones. What you do see are people interacting, humans interacting, music lovers enjoying each other's company and the sweat, and interacting with other humans to this soundtrack being created, this vibe that's being created. And I don't know if we need yondel bags at bars and shows and start, really like it doesn't bother me being on stage and seeing a sea of phones at me. Like I kind of just relish in it now, and I'm not pissy about it. But it's like, how many of you are actually going home in 6 months from now, going through there's that Art Deco, that blurry, blown out audio from 6 months ago when he played to 200 people in my hometown. Like, wow, I'm going to revisit that. You're never going to revisit it. Take the one and put it away and have that sort of unplugged, untethered, not distracted experience. Um, yeah, it's just crazy. I mean, I'm guilty for it. How many times have I just like my mind wanders watching something that's like got a little bit of a challenging scene, and you're like, "Where's my phone?" It's like this Pavlovian response where it's like it's like, "Oh, my brain's stressing out. I'm wigging out. I got to pick up this thing to be strapped." And so, like when you are making music to the ADD content addicted generation, it can be a really dangerous slippery slope as a musician, you know. I had someone in the radio, one on the labels like radio team tell me, oh, like a couple years ago, a year ago, can you make this song a little bit shorter? I'm like, it's 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
Right.
And he goes, well, 3 minutes is the new 3:30. And then about a year ago, that same person, can you make it 2.5 minutes? 2.5 is the new 3 minutes. I go, I thought 3 minutes was the new 3:30. And so almost as like a big this to that, not that person. I love that person. He's a great person. He's been with me forever and part of our team. And he's just doing his job. He's trying to help me be a success at that format. But this finger goes up to that thought writ large, that mentality when I write a 7.5 minute song like Serene Demon.
Yeah.
And it's like for someone like you who kind of remembers when time limits on something like radio used to have 4.5 minute like Mike McCready shredding a solo in the outro, or like, like that used to be a thing. I got it. Music evolves over the time, but like, don't tell me listeners completely forgot an outro exists and that
Right.
3 minutes and 45 seconds, like, let me clutch my pearls. OMG, this song is taking forever to end. It's like, if you write a good song, who cares how long it is? Good song is a good song.
That's right. It makes me think. I heard, like that. You mentioned 2 minutes or whatever. I heard, someone pushing that, like, if you can get this song to just be a piece of a verse and then the chorus, that's all that matters. Because of TikTok, because they wanted like something more applicable to a super short video or reel, which like something like that has a purpose, but it can't be it. But yeah, music. Am I right? No. But no, what I was going to say was it's funny because I'm super guilty as well with the phone thing. Here's a story I haven't really told anybody, but I went to see. Are you familiar with Nicole Atkins?
No, no.
Really great singer-songwriter, amazing voice. We went to see her in Philly back in September, and she was doing this slow song, and they had like a disco ball at the venue, and she was like, "Can we get that disco ball lit up?" And it was sparkling around. She was like, "Grab the person next to you and dance." So my wife and I are dancing, and I was also recording with my phone at the same time. And Nicole, in the middle of it, was like, "What are you doing? Put that down. Please just dance with her." And I was like, "Oh, right. Sorry, like, but it's true. Like we don't experience the moment anymore, and we don't kind of engage with media like with art like we used to. Like we used to dedicate time, and now there's so much of it, and we're afraid of missing the next one that we're not letting it grow.
I mean, it's a great sorry. It's a great great segue. I mean, that's literally what this whole album Serene Demon is about, is essentially, it's a lot of it is about like our relationship with happiness and the pursuit of happiness, and but also living in the moment. And an existentialist edict would propose and espouses that, like, if maybe there's like a little bit more of like a religious or an anti-religious connotation to it, but it's like you look up to the universe for answers, and as an existentialist, the benign indifference of the universe is absurd to me. And it's all about the finding happiness from within and purpose from within, and not really allocating these, offloading these burdens to, any particular person or thing or entity. It's about you, and you're in the driver's seat, and you're in control, and you're responsible for your feelings and your emotions and your life. And I know that sounds like a lot of tough love, and it almost sounds very cold and cynical, but it really hit me, and I feel like it can translate to two people standing in line, an existentialist or and maybe person who's not who believes maybe in a higher power, and that's kind of like the conversation between the two of them is what Serene Demon is all about. And I have troubles living and abiding by that set of rules, and I'm not sort of proselytizing for either case. Like, be religious and believe in a higher power or don't. But for me, like my pursuit of happiness and is like I'm really trying very, very hard to engage and live in the moment and not constantly need distractions and constantly need like just chill out and try and it's like when you're at dinner, or if you I mean you said you're married, so you probably you go on dates with your wife. Like, it's such a red flag for me to be on a date or be having like a very meaningful conversation with somebody, even just a platonic, chill dinner party conversation such as this, and just have the phone like in plain view, even if it's face down. Are you expecting like a more important call or text? Like, just when my parents got cell phones, and this is such an off tangent rant, they got phones like late in the game. My dad never was on social media. He's 71. He's had a phone for 5 years. I've seen him slowly get addicted to the phone. He's not impervious to it. Like, he just like everybody else. Like, it can get you whether you're young or you're old. It's just designed to suck you in, especially if you're a curious person and you love to learn. Like, wow, what an amazing little instrument I got here. I got like the entire encyclopedia at my fingertips. I got YouTube. I can do whatever I want. But, when they first got the phones, they would like power them down at night, and it's so cute. They would like go to bed and their phones would be like charged downstairs as if it was like a vacuum cleaner. Like, you know what I mean? And sometimes they'd forget because they're not on social media. They haven't been addicted yet. Sometimes they forget to turn their phone on till like the afternoon. And we would be like, Mom, Dad, just keep it on the whole time. And you don't need to do that. And now, of course, like, I go to my parents' house and have dinner with them. And like my dad's got the phone at the dinner table and he's like, we're watching a show and he's got the phone out. It's like, it's wild to me that we need these distractions.
It's crazy. It is really crazy. Like, I don't know that our brains are prepared to deal with it and to have like that. Like, it's one of those, we're just not ready. but
and imagine what the next 10 years
exactly
with AI and what it's only going to get like insane. Sorry to interrupt, but it reminded me of like, you go back, like, obviously I'm old enough to remember like the pre-internet era. Not that I want to go back to like, I'm going to the swimming pool as a kid with my two sisters and we're going to ride our bike to Crystal Pool and we have 1 quarter to put in the payphone to call Mom and Dad to pick us up. And like, you be there at 1:45 at that tree after school. So, or like whatever, like, 4:45, like you made these like strategic plans back in the day, and you had this capacity to memorize phone numbers and addresses and instructions and directions. And I'm glad that we have offloaded that to these devices, and it's freed us up to like this capacity to take on more information that's maybe more useful in our day to day. And I'm not a Luddite. I'm not like rebelling against that. But sometimes though, man, is it ever cool? Like, if you ever go to a music festival and there's bad reception, like infamously for years, I haven't been to Coachella in years, but when I went, you would lose your friends for 8 hours and not find them. Like, you would randomly see people just hugging and crying, running towards their like a group of friends, like because they'd been separated all day and they were like really starting to panic. And there's something so endearing and exciting and exhilarating about like being detached from this and living in the moment. If you ever go on vacation, do it. Like, put your phone, like, have a day where you and your wife or you and your friends will be like, okay, we're gonna like go phoneless and just try and figure it out. We're going to the beach, we don't need our phones, and just baby step and see how far you can kind of become untethered from that umbilical cord. It really forces you to have conversations with strangers ask for directions. What time is it? What's a good place to get a taco around here? Like, you don't rely on Yelp, you don't rely on Google Maps. Like, you do, like, you raw dog that. It's pretty sick. It's a fun time. I highly recommend
I'll
y'all
give it a
try it.
shot. That sounds fun. That sounds fun. It's you just put two of my favorite memories in my life into my head that I just realized would not have happened with cell phones, and that is I used to go to Las Vegas like every 6 months to meet up with a bunch of friends from college because some were out in California, I'm out in Philly, and it was just like a
Hmm.
meeting place or whatnot. And one of the trips we made, we went out, and within like 15 minutes of us leaving the hotel, I lost everybody. I was just alone in Vegas. And so I didn't have a phone to call them or anything. So I just hung out in Vegas by myself. I went to a club. They let me in this club. They let me bypass the line because they were like, "You're by yourself." And I was like, "Yeah." And they were like, "Go right in." I ended up sitting at a table. I didn't understand table service or anything like that back in the day.
You
I
bought
ended
like
up
one bottle to yourself.
no, I sat at this table and this guy was like, "Can I help you?" And I was like, "I just my feet are tired." And he was like, "Yeah, we paid for all of this." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't." And he was like, "You're by yourself?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Stick around." And like so like, things like
Bottle
that.
service. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Never would have happened if I had a phone. And then the other one, I'm in high school. It was the very first Fish show I ever went to. And at the end of
Wow.
the night, I my friend went to go get the car, and I lost him. Like I was just like and then he didn't come back. It was super packed. I walked to where the car used to be. It was gone. And I said to these like strangers, I was just like, "Well, I guess I'm gonna walk home now." Because what else was I gonna do? I couldn't call him. I didn't, and like so I started walking, and all of a sudden I just faintly hear Nate, and then there's my buddy
Yeah.
sticking his head out the car. But yeah, those kind of things like that's life, man. Like those are experiences that just do not exist because I would just be like, "Well, I'll take an Uber, I guess," or like I would have been gone. Like,
Yeah, and it's like it's happy accidents happen when you're trying to fix a problem in the studio, or you're trying to do this. You're trying to do A and B happens, but B is a much better idea. Oh my God, we wouldn't have actually thought of that if we didn't try and fix this thing and stumble upon this happy accident, right? And I love happy accidents in life. And I'm such a preparer of everything. I've got binders and duotangs, and everybody gets a binder when we go into the studio or on tour. We pull up to like border security and Department of Homeland Security, whatever, at the US Canada border, and they're like, "Who's in charge here?" I'm like, "Actually, I've got my binder here, sir." Just pulling out our visa. Like, I'm very prepared, but like, I'm very anal prepared, like just annoyingly prepared, but I do look forward to those happy accidents. And when they happen and they're like pure joy, I mean, that's, I guess, what I'm trying to invite more of that into my life. And, going to New York City with barely any plans, just a few instruments and an open-ended itinerary. That was my way of saying, I'm going to create, here's the sandbox. I'm going to build a sandbox, fill it with sand. I don't have any designs for castles or shapes or little things I'm going to build just yet, but I know I'm going to build something, and I'm going to just see what happens. And that is sort of like a metaphor for how I want to live the next chunk of my life.
it's killer. Can I also thank you for being the first person to say the word duotang in the longest time? Like I forgot all about that. Thank you. Thank you for that. At this time, you want to go through my questionnaire. This is how I close all my interviews. This is the Jawntlet. It starts with the one-hit wonders, one-hit wonder in name only. You're just picking a favorite. First one, Billy Joel or Elton John? Who do you prefer?
Can I talk this through? So Elton
Yeah,
John,
absolutely.
Funeral for a Friend, 10 minutes long, track one on whatever, the Yellow Brick Road album, also an influence on Serene Demon. Billy Joel, Late to the Party on Billy Joel, but also I love Glass Houses. Definitely have, man, that is a toughie. I'm gonna say Sir Elton, but
Okay.
like 51% to 49.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. There's no wrong answers to these, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, you can't go wrong. Number two, Debbie Harry or Joan Jett?
Debbie Harry.
Yeah, good answer. Good answer.
I have
Aretha
her
Franklin.
book
Oh,
on
yeah?
my night table. Yeah, I'm about to read it, but yeah.
Nice. Aretha Franklin or Tina Turner?
I'm gonna say Tina,
Okay.
R.I.P. Are they
Yeah,
both dead?
they
Okay.
are. Yeah, yeah, they're both
Yeah.
dead. Yeah, sadly.
Sweet
Uh,
ladies.
very much so. Nirvana or Pearl Jam?
Another tough one. I do have a Pearl Jam tattoo on my right shoulder. So I mean, but Nirvana, it's like it's like three bites of like the best meal you've ever had, or like consistently a buffet of like pretty good food.
Yeah.
But like the consistency and the enduring sort of, I mean, I just saw Pearl Jam last year. I have the Pearl Jam tattoo. I bought my first guitar, Sunburst Stratocaster, just like Mike McCready's. I've smashed a guitar on stage because Mike McCready's known to smash up a guitar here and there. And I got to go with Pearl Jam. Pearl
I,
Jam
I
all the
love it.
way.
I love it. That's my
But
choice too.
Nirvana, god damn it, they have a huge, huge, huge special place in my heart. Yeah.
Yeah, just not a tattoo. So,
Yeah.
Janis Joplin or Stevie Nicks?
Stevie Nicks.
The big cliche, Beatles or the Stones?
Uh, this one is a tough one too because my hot take is that I like the solo catalog post breakup of the Beatles more. I listen to it more than I do the actual Beatles catalog. But the Beatles, I feel like you get two bands out of that answer. You get like Paul's solo stuff, John Lennon, Plasticona Band. You get like, if you're saying like the Beatles, just the band versus just the Rolling Stones. I mean, I like prefer the Rolling Stones music, maybe catalog. I don't know, 59 to 40, 51 to 49. I'm going to say the Rolling Stones.
I like it. That's my answer too. And I haven't said this in a long time, so I'm going to say it again. People maybe have never heard me say it before, but to me, the Beatles are like four geniuses, right? Whereas the Stones are just a perfect band. Like, and that isn't to say that like, because early Beatles there's nothing tighter than early Beatles, but like the Stones to me are just what I envision a rock band is, you know what I mean? And so that's why I always prefer to pick them in the head to head, if you will.
I mean, you get a revolving door and many, many eras of the Rolling Stones, which,
Yes.
you know, when musicians are writing in their 20s and 30s and into their 40s, you know, beyond that, it gets a little dicey. Very few, like, coming from a guy who's like just entered that stage of my life. But I feel like with the Beatles, like it's hard because they broke up at like what 27, 28 years old, and then they had another career outside of that where they're writing as like young men in their 30s with like the burden of like fame in their life and all that, whereas like the Stones kept writing way longer, so you get different eras and perspectives and blah blah blah. So yeah, it's a tough one, but that's how good the Beatles were in such a
Yeah.
small time, changing music and writing such impactful stuff. It's a hard question. Beatles or the Stones?
I've been working on this question. Should I ever get 2 seconds with Paul McCartney on any show or something like that? Because he's got a book coming out about his time in Wings, and so I sent an email out when I got the press release, and I was like, "Look, I know this isn't going to happen, but do you think Paul wants to come on the podcast?" And
Yeah.
and they were like, "Yeah, probably not, but I mean, we'll forward the request." And I was like, "I appreciate that for not laughing in my face." But my one question I want to ask him is, you know, the Beatles are so influential that they influenced everything that came after them, right? And he, you know, music as we know it essentially exists because of what they did. So my question for Paul is, have you ever heard a song and then gone, maybe we made a mistake?
Right.
Maybe
Yeah.
we shouldn't have. But maybe we shouldn't have changed music. But it's a stupid question.
Yeah. Someone asked him, Mark Maron asked him when he was promoting like one of his recent albums and was like, you know, I know like Mark Maron's like, he's like, yeah, like you interview a rock star in their 60s and they're always saying, this is my best album yet. And you're like, bullshit. And he's like, I'm going to play along. I'm going to pander to Paul here. And, you know, so do you think you're writing your best stuff right now with this album? And he looks at Mark Maron. He's like, I was in the Beatles, dude.
Yeah.
The bar is pretty high, you know?
It's got to be hard to create after that. Like I just talked to Andrew Doss, who was in Fun, and I was like, when you guys write something as ubiquitous as We Are Young, like I don't understand how you write anything else ever again because like you're like I'm such a mental case with like any kind of little like success. I couldn't imagine something that's like, you know, that just breaks through the zeitgeist like that, like how you continue to objectively create something true and not just chase fire, you know, the old the Icarus, you know, just
Yeah.
you flew too close to the sun.
Or Sisyphus just rolling that ball up
Roll,
the hill over and over again and getting crushed by your own, the weight of the world. I mean, that is an age-old conundrum, success. You almost have to have that fire in your belly, and maybe the success is like, we got the yacht and two houses and bank account. Like I can eat wherever I want. It's like, you could, oh, I wanted that keyboard, but I can't really afford it. And oh, no, actually, I can't afford it. I wrote that song that everybody
yeah,
likes. Um, but on the flip side, that you're not pursuing that when you write those songs. You're
right,
trying to just write something that is more going to like emotionally, like the biggest compliment a musician can ever get is like there's a specificity to a compliment, like that song that you wrote really affected me when I was going through blah blah blah, or I fell in love with that song when I was falling in love with my husband or my wife or whatever, or my kids sing that in this in we someone told me that they had a listening party, a Serene Demon listening party in this, and he was like, I know you probably don't know where this town is, but it's a very small town in like Vermont or something like that. You probably will never tour here, but just know there's like a bunch of people in a barn cranking your album right now, and it's like really we're like a little community of Deco fans, and it was like I almost cried. I was like, that meant so much to hear that. So anyways, yeah, specific that is what you're writing the hit for, the thing
right,
that becomes the hit, not like, I hope this makes me rich and famous.
exactly.
So yeah, it's like, as long as you have that, honest, true kind of lodestar, guiding you, I think, yeah, that's the main thing, right?
Hell yeah,
And then
hell yeah.
Paul McCartney's had that with like a
How many
million
times?
songs,
Yeah.
he cranked those out for years, right? So yeah, I mean, he's obviously a special person.
For sure. The last of the one hit wonders, Bohemian Rhapsody or Stairway to Heaven?
Bohemian Rhapsody.
Knew that was coming mile away.
Yeah,
Not gonna
Serene
lie.
Demon. I mean, I've said is my Bohemian Rhapsody. Um, Stairway. I just saw the new Led Zeppelin documentary. Um, my dad saw Zeppelin 3 times in concert.
Whoa.
Zeppelin 1, Zeppelin 2, and Zeppelin 4 when they came to Vancouver, incrementally getting bigger and bigger than Zeppelin 4, right, with Stairway. And so I always grew up in like a Zeppelin house and the Doors and classic rock. Like in my teenage years when I was really getting into it, being like, Dad, didn't you say you saw this band like when I was a kid? Yeah, I actually saw them a bunch of times. And I have a special, there's a special place in my heart for Led Zeppelin, but Bohemian Rhapsody,
Yeah.
come on.
It's something
Both are
special.
referenced in one of my favorite movies, Wayne's World.
Yes. That's actually where this question came from. And so Paul Myers is Mike Myers' older brother. And the Stairway thing was something that Paul had told Mike. And Bohemian Rhapsody was something that Mike experienced, the lip syncing in the car. In Paul's car, so I got to ask the person the reason why this this matchup exists. I got to ask him which he picked, and he didn't really give me an answer. He was like, "I don't know that I can pick."
Mike didn't give you, or Paul Myers?
Paul Myers didn't.
And
Paul's great.
funny, Paul's great. I mean, Mike being a Canadian national treasure, he talking about like artists who are like just really sure with their vision and sticking to their vision, and even if it might be some sort of form of like career suicide, and this stubbornness with their vision. Mike Myers tells this story about the studio who were funding Wayne's World, the studio saying, well, no one cares about Queen. You're not using Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody. And do you remember the song they wanted him to use in
No,
that scene?
I forget.
It's a Guns N' Roses song.
Oh,
They
that's
wanted
right.
it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like
It was because Appetite had just blown up, right? And he goes, we didn't drive around in the Murphmobile listening to Appetite for Destruction. We listened to Queen, and we're gonna use Queen. And it's like, thank God he stuck to his and I think it like went all the way up the flagpole, and even like Lorne Michaels himself had to get involved. Like, Mike Myers, are you really good? Is this a hill you want to die on? And he goes, yes. Like, I will torpedo my own movie because this is the scene, and I'm telling you, this is what it has to be. And I love that shit.
yeah.
It gives me it puts that fire in your belly. So if you're an artist out there and you're being told by the suits, by your manager, and you've spent every waking hour of your joie de vivre is this decision, this whether your record sounds a certain way, whether the chorus happens in a certain way, and you really truly believe it, and it's like it's an authentic representation of who you are as an artist. Don't capitulate ever.
Hell yeah. Well, it's like there's a group that I'm a big fan of, and in the press leading up to their new album that isn't out yet, but is coming out. They've been talking about how the label that they were on didn't understand it. They didn't get it, and so they let them walk with it, and then they took it somewhere else. And that excites me more than anything, because what that tells me is that it's good. Because
Yeah.
because when they don't understand, that means they can't fit it into, we're going back to the Spotify playlist, but they can't fit it into a certain thing. And so if they created something that, even if it fails, that like I'm a big proponent of even like big wild swings that don't hit. You know what I mean? Like as long as you took it, like I'm so interested in like the artistic approach of just going for what you thought, what you were truly trying to put out there, regardless of whether it's good or not. Like that's it for me. That's the stuff.
Amen. Yeah, I mean, Bowie did that better than anybody in the 70s. I mean, it's hard to do that now, and I'm facing that marketing conundrum now because yeah, I get compared to glam rock, I get compared to a few genres and a few artists over and over and over again. But I mean, from Trespasser through till now, there's definitely like a departure in the sonics, and I've dabbled in a lot of, it's a bit of it's like it's not like I'm reinventing myself like Bowie going from Aladdin Sane to like Plastic Soul was like quite a drastic right hand turn, and I haven't made a right hand turn as extreme as like some musicians have in their career. But man, is it ever exhilarating, and it's like, oh shit, to kind of like, I'll do a lazy example. Arctic Monkeys put out Tranquility Base Casino. Like a lot of their true fans were like pissed that that album came out and sounds the way it sounds, and the style changed, and I loved it. It's like my favorite album of theirs, to be honest, like more than AM, more than their biggest commercial success. And it was such a right hand turn for them. I love when artists do that. I love when they, like you say, take a risk, even if it doesn't hit. It's like by album 4 or 5 or 6, like, are you just going to keep writing the same song over and over
Right.
again and look the same way and dress the same way? Fontaine's DC, perfect example. They went cyberpunk with this album, completely reinvented themselves. For the next album, they might all be back in suits and clean haircuts, and like that's great. Or like Mephisto, the character that Bono played with Achtung Baby or Zoo Ropa or Pop Tour, I forget which one, but like painted his face and like became a character. St. Vincent kind of wore a character wigs and did like a kind of soul thing. Like I love that stuff. That to me is like it's art, it's theater, it's you're trying shit and you're trying to like learn how to write songs in a different style and just throwing it at the wall. And if it doesn't stick, there's always the next album.
Yeah. You're talking to a guy who used to wear a skeleton mask on stage and perform as Alexander Scarchild. So like, yeah,
Wow.
yeah, 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 yeah. Oh
Cool.
yeah, yeah. I got some demons in my past.
Nice.
The second half of the Jawntlet, this is the top 10 countdown. In this, we use Jawn to be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to be music; it can be anything you think of. So with the first one, it's what was your first Jawn? What was the first thing you were obsessed with when you were a kid?
Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really wanted the hairstyle. I really wanted it was Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters and Ninja Turtles and Star Wars. Those were my first three obsessions. But if I have to go back, I think Star Wars, Luke Skywalker was a lot of young boys' obsession. But for me, it was like I wanted to be um, Bill Murray's character. I watched, my parents had to, this is gonna really, really date me. Beta cassettes can hold a lot. They're smaller, but they somehow hold way more footage, like 5, 6 hour movies, or you could put multiple movies. So they would take Ghostbusters and they would be like the movie looped on a beta cassette, and same with Star Wars, so that I could just like sit in front of the TV and watch it 2 times in a row. Like that's how obsessed I was as a young child.
That's awesome.
Definitely on the spectrum,
Well,
which is
you're
great.
you're talking to somebody who got married dressed as Han Solo to his wife dressed as Princess Leia. So I mean,
Holy, wow.
so yes, we
Come
swear.
on.
Yeah, yeah, I'm a bit of a geek. Number two, what's your current John? What are you into right now?
What am I into right now? My current Jawn that I'm into right now, I am I'm really into, what can I give you? I'm an open book right. I mean, I'm really into really into like Isley Brothers and like soul and Isaac Hayes and like that whole genre of like funk and soul from the 70s and Philly, right? Philly soul, Sigma sound. That to me is like that's all I've been listening to for the last probably couple months now. But yeah, it's it's just I'm taking apart the pieces and trying to see how those songs were composed and written. There's a lot of strings and horns and but like yeah, I who knows, maybe I'm entering my Young Americans phase.
It's they just dropped the 50th anniversary release today. Like what
I
timing?
know. I
It's
know. But yeah,
incredible.
that's the latest Jawn, latest obsession. If you asked me 3 months ago, 4 months ago, it would have been film noir, neo noir, and I was doing all the music videos for the record and really talking about the record before it came out, and it was still kind of on that plane. But now I'm burnt out on all that. I'm done. I've moved on from that genre and that influence. I'm writing the next record. I'm composing it right now in little chunks, and I'm playing around with ideas. So maybe in a year and a half from now, a year from now, we'll be talking about the next one.
I dig it. I dig it. Number three, what was the first concert you saw? First live show?
First live show I went to would be, I mean, I'm from Canada, so there's a couple of Canadian bands that jump out. I remember seeing the Tragically Hip as a teenager. I remember seeing, this is really funny. I remember seeing Nickelback as like a young teenager because they not a lot of bands came to Victoria where I grew up. So when any rock band would come here, even Nickelback in 2001 or 2000, right when they were blowing up, I was like, I'm gonna go see him. I know, like, whatever, it's a rock concert. I remember seeing, yeah, those ones. But then once I hit 20 and I lived in Vancouver, it was like it was every night I was going to concerts.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the cool thing to say. I wish I could say like, yeah, Prince was my first concert when I was in my mom's womb, like not even born yet. I went to see. That's like no, it was like not really cool. That many cool bands. Raffi, like the
That's
Victoria
cool.
Symphony, Raffi, the Victoria Symphony Orchestra doing Swan Lake when I was 9. Like I didn't really see too many cool concerts until I was like in my early 20s and like had autonomy over like my spending and had a job and I could go to shows. But yeah, in my teenage years there was not a lot of bands that came to Victoria. It was a very, very tough place to grow up if you loved rock and roll and indie music.
Yeah. Oh, it's wild. Number four, what was your last concert, last live show you saw?
I just went and saw my friend's band, Current Swell, play at the Royal Theater. That was the last one. Yeah, that was the last show. Shout out to Scott and those guys in Current Swell. Um, yeah, haven't been to a lot of shows lately. I need to get out more.
Yeah, I dig it. I dig it. Hey, you've been a little busy. A
Yeah,
little bit.
a little bit.
Number five, what was your favorite concert?
Favorite concert. Um, I do a lot of really good concerts. My favorite concert. I'd say, I mean, I saw Prince play a tiny little club in Vancouver. It was the
Ooh,
after party to the show that he played at the stadium. That was pretty cool. Was notorious for like just playing all night and um yeah, he played his own after party and it was like maybe 150 people there. No phones allowed. This was like 2010 or 11. And I mean, he played so long and he came with like a towel wrapped around his head and he played bass, sang a bit, but his backing band, it was like in a bar in Yaletown in Vancouver. And it was like, it went on late. I was like, it's 3 in the morning. I'm going to go to bed. Like I left. It was a lot of Prince for one night. So that sticks out. Um, Seen some pretty epic, music festival performances. Yeah, let's just stick with that one. We'll keep it clean.
yeah, no, that
Prince
makes
in a
sense.
tiny little club was pretty special.
Yeah, it seems it. Yeah, that seems like a pretty big one. Number six, who have you never seen live that you wish you would have? They can be living or dead.
David Bowie or Tom Petty. Never saw either of them, and it haunts me to this day.
Yeah, I'll make the Tom Petty one really sting. I saw he toured with the Black Crowes, and at the end of the Black Crowes set, a friend of mine got in a drunken fight with somebody else right as Tom Petty was coming on stage, and we had to leave. And then I was like, well, I'll just catch him next time. And then there wasn't a next time.
Oh shoot.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
hurts. That
that
hurts.
sucks. That's almost like how important is that friendship to you?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, don't worry. I don't ever let him let that down. That
Yeah.
that comes up every time we talk. Hey, remember when? And then for Bowie, that was my first two concerts when I was a kid. So
When tell me about that real quick.
yeah,
What
1983, the Serious Moonlight Tour.
that would have been the one.
And that one's not as much as in my memory as much as 87, 87,
Glass
yeah,
Spiders?
87 Glass Spider, which
Oh my
was
God.
which like I didn't understand following that not every concert had like big giant huge set pieces and all, like like to a kid it blew me away. And we were talking about people taking swings and stuff like that. I'm going to tell you right now, Never Let Me Down's a fucking great album. I know he didn't like it or whatnot, kind of disowned it later in life. But the song Zeros on that album is my favorite Bowie song of all time.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It just,
Interesting.
it just, I know that it's tied to that experience and that time period and all. But man, that song fucks. I love it. I love it
That's
so much.
crazy. I mean, I've kind of like there's like some cognitive dissonance in my mind from like I feel like Live Aid to Trent Reznor period, like that 85-ish to 95 period is like I mean, it was like some dark times for David Bowie. Like, I think his personal life was getting good. He's meeting him on. He's quitting drinking. Da da da. But like, man, he's artistically like completely lost. He's like, maybe zeros. Yeah, heroes, zeros. Maybe
Yeah.
I'll just self-reference. He's trying to get into like jungle and house and like he's just this middle-aged guy going to like underground clubs and everybody's like, ugh, that nerd's here. That old middle-aged man's here. Poor Bowie. Like, but he got it back.
Yeah.
He finished strong.
I mean, what
God.
a walk-off homer with Black
Yeah.
Star. You know what I mean? Like just
I know. He turned death into a work of art. I believe
Yeah.
Tony Visconti perfectly encapsulated it. Just like I'm terminally like if you were terminally ill, like would you not like what like most people have this like very sad ending where everybody's like doing a living wake and a tribute concert. And I mean that's a whole thing. We lost in Canada Gord Downey and it was like the whole nation was in mourning. They did a big farewell. He's terminally ill tour. It was just emotionally draining and sad and heartbreaking. But Bowie did it like the opposite. It's just like released an album, you think he's gonna be here forever, and then 2 days later he's dead. And you're
Yeah.
like, what? And it was just like shock. And then you have this album to sit with that's sort of like hidden and laced with hidden meaning and very poetic stuff.
He's literally, I think, the greatest artist ever. Like, to me, like it just like his entire life was spent just kind of pushing boundaries and trying to discover, just the essence of creativity and the essence of engagement with and challenging thoughts and stuff like that. He blows me away.
You got David Bowie, Raffi, and Nickelback all mentioned in the last 5 minutes.
That's
It's good.
right.
It's like we're in some really we've been really
We're
rocking
in, we're
some
in it.
great heavy hitting artists here.
We're in it. Number 7, name an unappreciated, John. Something you wish people paid more attention to.
Um, I'm gonna. I mean, I've been talking about this book a lot, Mood Machine. So I'm gonna shout out another book. The book that kind of inspired a lot of this record is La Samurai. Sorry, The Stranger. I'll get to La Samurai in a second. The Stranger by Albert Camus. Very short book. Um, that one was sort of, and I mean, if you're a philosophy major or an English lit person, you're gonna probably eye roll if you hear that book. Are you reaching for it right
I
now?
li- I I used to keep a copy in my gig bag, and I thought it
Oh
was in there
crap!
still, but no, I must have
Oh
put it in the
cool!
bookshelf. Yeah.
Oh, that's wild. Yeah, so that one, I mean, maybe it's not underappreciated depending on like what kind of scene you roll in. If if you're
Right.
bookish and you're into philosophy, I mean, that's like a stone cold classic. The movie Le Samurai, starring Alain Delon, R.I.P., just passed away not too long ago, directed by Jean-Pierre Melville, French new wave cinema, but film noir. And it is beautifully shot. If you get like a 4K scan, I think it was in Criterion Collection or the channel, like you can watch it. It's pretty easy. You can even rent it on YouTube or whatever. What a crazy movie. And the soundtrack to it by Francois de Roubaix really inspired a lot of my compositions on the Serene Demon album. Just the use of strings and horns and brass and this tension. It feels like a spy movie, but like it's noir and it's he's very stoic and he plays an assassin in Paris in the late 60s and it's shot in color, but it's got really rich just beautiful cinematography and it's very much when you watch it, you're like, there's something here that reminds me of something contemporary, and you would be bang on if you thought the movie Drive and Ryan Gosling's performance very much inspired from La Samurai. Two very influential pieces of art that influenced this art in the making and writing and composing of the album Serene Demon, and especially the song Serene Demon.
Continuing how crazy I am, when I was in college, I took French classes specifically because they had a French cinema class. I went to school for TV and film, so I forced my way through French badly just so I could take the French cinema class because I was such an obsessive with the French New Wave. Like
Wow.
that was my like, and then like I got to completely dig into Truffaut and Godard and just all of it. Like that is like that's my little hidden secret. Like
Cool.
I don't even try to make people watch it. I'm like, this is just for me and this is just what I love. You know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah.
but it's funny how much that stuff inspires people and what comes out of that inspiration. It was just a magical period of cinema coming out of France at that time.
Film noir really inspired the making of the album. Then when I had to go and do the photo shoots and do make the music videos, the Serene Demon music video was came because I'm like, well, what other film noir tropes can I really lean into? And I'm going down my wormhole, watching the Ariel, the YouTube uh, content creator, did this amazing video essay called Collateral and the Death of Neon. And it's about if you watch films that were shot in Hollywood in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, you'll notice street lighting in America has played a very important character in all of these films, especially the noir genre. And if you look at 70s stuff like Michael Mann's Thief, if you look at not that it's a noir movie, but I saw it in theater at the Vic that I was telling you about earlier. The movie Terminator, the first one, and a lot of night shots, and you see street lights have a bluish hue to them, on film, and that was because they were mercury vapor lamps. That's what America grid system was based on. And then like in the 90s, they switched to sodium vapor lamps because they were cheaper. And then you see movies, there's a bit of a yellowish sepia, warmer tone at night. And then they switched to LEDs. And you watch Collateral with Michael Mann. He's not only shooting LA, but he's shooting at LA for the first time on digital, and he gets a different depth of field. And he was able to like get, there's all this technical stuff involved that he didn't have access to when shooting on film. So I really appreciated this person's like super nerdy attention to this detail. But visually, it your eyes and the color and the mood affects the performance and the music and how all those pieces interact with your eyes and your ears and your heart and your soul. And here I am years later in Canada watching this documentary and all the clips of these old movies. I'm writing them down. I'm like, yeah, I got to rewatch that one. I haven't seen Thief. And that inspired the music video for Serene Demon. So it's interesting how you just collect little bits, and on your journey, you find someone who's aggregating all of this and bringing to light something you didn't know about the genre, which is how the evolution in street lighting in America affected the genre writ large over a 40-year period. And yeah,
That's
super
killer.
nerdy stuff.
I got to
Yeah.
track that video down. It sounds fascinating. I dig that. Number 8, what's your favorite album?
My favorite album of all time. Um, my favorite album of all time. I'm gonna say something that no one watching this is gonna probably get. Is no one watching this is probably going to think this is coming out of my mouth in 2 seconds. I'm gonna say Deer Hunter Halcyon Digest.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I go back to that album over and over and over again. It's my favorite album
I
of
like
all
it.
time. Yeah,
That's
I mean,
awesome.
I'm sure if you asked me a year from now or 6 months ago or whatever, it'll change. I could say, I mean, there's a lot of albums by David Bowie between 72 and 83 that could be on my list. Harry Nilsson, Nilsson Schmilsson, Curtis Mayfield's first album. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of music in there that just that rotates, but I just something about that album hit me in my 20s and has an enduring effect on me in my 30s and now in my early 40s. And I just put it on the other day and I'm like, yep, no, it's like perfectly flawless, but also flawed in so many artistic ways. It's an imperfectly perfect album, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, love
Fantastic
it.
answer. Number 9, name an artist whose output you'll consume anything they release.
I mean, yeah, not David Bowie, because there's large swaths of that real estate that I would completely redevelop and sell off to the highest bidder. But I think Tame Impala has a pretty good, consistent, prolific output. Deer Hunter is another band, I would say. Um, yeah, hard to say. There's I mean, what artist? I don't even. Yeah, I'd say Tame Impala. I don't know.
Great
For
answer.
band?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That question took me by surprise because every artist, if they're taking wild risks and they're taking wild swings, is gonna put something out that is not canon, and you might only like that one thing profoundly with such reverence and disregard. Like Harry Nilsson, I love Nilsson Schmilsson. There's a few songs on either side of that record, or few records on it, but like there's a lot of music in there in his catalog. It just is wallpaper to me. Paul McCartney has an amazing solo career, has written millions of good songs, but there's chunks of his later career where I'm like, I don't need this.
Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's how many, Bowie, like 70s, all from Hunky Dory to Let's Dance. I'm in, baby. Like mainline that shit to my veins. But yeah, I'm just looking at my vinyl right now. It's tough to answer that. Every artist has like a stinker or something. It's like maybe like less so. But yeah, I mean, Deer Hunter consistently for me, I mean, pretty much a fan of almost everything that band's put out, or Bradford Cox. Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough answer. I'll stick
Yeah.
to that one.
That's a great answer. I dig it. Number 10, the 10th and final of the top 10 countdown. What is your favorite Jawn of all time? Can be anything you want it to be.
Favorite Jawn of all time. I'm going to say we've talked a lot about music. We've talked a lot about movies. We haven't talked about food or drinks. So I'm going to give a shout out to the humble black truffle mushroom shaved on a nice plate of risotto. And for a cocktail, I'm going to shout out if you're not drinking, which I'm kind of cleansing right now. There's no alcohol in this house right now. I love to drink alcohol, don't get me wrong. But right now, it's Topo Chico soda water with Peychaud's bitters.
Okay.
Nice and crisp, nice and effervescent. That's a great winter, spring, summer, non-alcoholic, effervescent cocktail. If I'm drinking, you can bet I will enjoy an old fashioned or a Negroni if made even half decently.
Hell
So
yeah.
shout out to a couple non-alcoholic cocktails. Shout out to a couple of alcoholic cocktails, and a mushroom risotto with like some fresh black truffles. That's my John. A
I
nice
love it.
meal.
I
Okay,
love it.
a
Yes,
nice
that's
meal.
that's
Yeah.
hearty. I like it. Great answer. So the spring tour, is that what I heard? I don't know that it's been announced yet, but there's a tour on the horizon? Is that
Tours on the horizon. It's turning more into like a summer tour,
okay?
to be
Yeah,
honest. Visas, all that stuff, dates are in the works. I mean, yeah,
that's cool. I will
yeah.
definitely keep an eye out for that. I hope Philly becomes one of those dates because
I love Philadelphia and I want to come to Pardon me, Philadelphia. It's weird to have a connection with the city. Just like Philly is an iconic city. You live in Philadelphia, WXPN, it's such a history there. But like, you look at the map of North America and as a musician, like there's like, oh yeah, Seattle's close to Victoria. Like I should have a connection to the Pacific, and I do. But there's this weird WXPN's been so good to me, and Philadelphia's been so good to me. I have a very a kindred, kind reverence, a connection, if you will, to that scene and those people and that town. So I'm always pushing. If we're on the East Coast, we're going to be playing Philadelphia at some point. It's just we have to. My
it's,
tens of fans demand it.
well, definitely one sitting right here demands it. And like the like I said, the album Serene Demon is out now on streaming. There's physical available as well, right?
Yeah,
Vinyl.
yeah. Vinyl. We should. We'll talk. Yeah, we'll get you a vinyl. But those
Oh, I
who
love
are
it.
not Nate and have a podcast, you can get it at your local record store. I'm sure there's. What's the record store in Philly? The one that
Uh,
the indie store that you want to shout out.
Let's see. Oh man, see now I'm going to get in trouble if I pick one and not
You
another.
can name a
No, no.
couple.
I'll do Main Street Music, which is just on the outskirts. This is Manayunk, but it's technically Philadelphia. Is an incredible little shop. Not just that, but they also release records as well. They released
Oh,
a
cool.
artist or a group called Buzz Zemer, who's like a Philly staple, or was in the '90s, and they just put out like a lost and found of some of their earlier stuff. So shout out to Main Street Music. Also Friends. I love those guys.
Main Street Music. Well, Main Street Music. Go there and buy the record.
There it
And
is.
they could definitely order it in. That way, the record store makes a little bit of money, the label makes a bit of money, the distributor makes a bit of money, I make a bit of money. That's the best way. You go to a local store. And yeah, it's definitely a record to be listened to on a turntable. Of all my records that I've released, this one I'm the most proud of to be listened to in that format. I can't say the same about all my records because you lose a little bit when you put it on vinyl. You lose certain frequencies and you make little compromises to the mix and the sonics. But this one, I can vouch, it sounds really good on a turntable. So buy it at your local record store. And if it's not there, just ask them to order it in. Or you can
Hell,
order it on the website, but order from the store in your hometown. And if that hometown is Philly, go to the outskirts to Main Street Records.
There it is. I love it. If anybody wants to track you down on the internet, what's do you do socials, right? You're a social.
Yeah,
guy.
yeah. Just D''ECCO Art Deco. You can find me pretty quickly there. Yeah, artdecomusic.ca.
And we'll, of course, have links to everything in the show notes if you would like to click and be lazy about it and not do the Google search yourself. Art, thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I am, like I said, I'm an absolute fan, and am so glad this conversation did not let me down. This was just an absolute pleasure.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the support. And yeah, we'll see you soon. We'll see you on the other side, everybody.